Hello there and welcome to the English Language Club. It's time for our weekly hangout. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever the time is where you are. My name is Colin Munro and this is Tony Culper.
Good to be here.
And we are here to just hang out with you guys and answer any questions you have about learning English. I can see we've got a few people watching already. Lolly's here. Hello to France. How are you? Good to see you again. IT for you says hi, and Amani Mohammed says hi as well. So that's great. I'm thinking we may not get as many people as usual this week, being the week between Christmas and New Year, but we'll see. So yeah, get some questions coming in so that we've got something to talk about. Otherwise, this could be interesting. But Tony, I think we had one or two comments left over from last week that we can talk about before while we're waiting for any other comments to come in.
Yes, definitely. There was some discussion about, maybe you should start with the word practice here. There was some discussion about the word practice, since we were talking about practicing English. And so different people were saying, oh, you spell practice with an S. Oh, no, you spell practice with a C. And so Mark Hamilton kind of pointed this out and said, okay, so apparently practice with a C is the word used in American English. However, in British English, the convention has been to use practice with a C for the noun form and practice with an S for the verb form. Now, his question was, I wonder whether it's worth it to uphold this convention. And unfortunately, we don't get to decide that. The entire world community doesn't yet, anyway, tune in to our YouTube channels to hear the rules, and then they just go and follow those rules, and we change all of English. But also, we would want that to happen anyway, because that's one of English's strengths that we talk about a lot, is that there are no hard and fast rules about what you can or cannot do. The dictionaries and English teachers just try to keep up with things as they change over time.
Yeah. So as far as you're aware, there isn't a convention that says, you know, with an S is a verb and with a C is a noun or anything like that?
No, I do believe that is the convention.
Oh, there is a convention, right?
Yes. However, it's not in American English. In American English, we only use the C version of it.
Yeah. I guess personally, I would rather see things simplified and just have the one spelling.
Exactly.
And I think the S kind of looks like it could be pronounced practice. You know, it's too similar to some other words that are pronounced eyes. So, yeah. But yeah, both are valid spellings. Then is what we're saying.
Well, for different things, though, right? If you're using practice, like I'm practicing English in British English, you have to use the S spelling. If you were to, but then you say, you know, it's time for soccer practice, then you would have to use the C spelling. I tend to agree with you. It's not one of those things that it's really adding anything. There are some cases where, you know, the verb and the noun are spelled differently or pronounced differently. Like we talk about produce versus produce, right?
Well, that's a good example of how just the word stress. By stressing a different vowel, it becomes a different word.
Exactly.
Although the words are related in that case.
But honestly, I think that English speakers are generally aware of the fact that a word can be a noun or a verb. We don't necessarily need to have the words spelled differently, just because there's so many. There's just so many verbs that can also be nouns and vice versa in English.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got a few more people joining us, including a couple of people on Facebook. Biconista Ima, I hope I'm saying that right, and Chima are watching on Facebook. That's great. And we've also got Jamal in Morocco. So hello to all of you. And Amani Mohammed, who I mentioned earlier, says, I'm so happy to watch this. So we're so happy that you are watching this. It's great to have you. We try to do this every Tuesday, and we've done it every Tuesday for over 6 months now. So and yeah, I don't think we have any plans to stop. So yeah, set your alarm 2 p.m. UK time, or whatever the time is now in wherever you are. That's when we'll be here live on YouTube. And if you aren't already subscribed, make sure you are. Make sure you subscribe and click the bell icon, and then you'll get notified whenever we go live. So we got a question from Lolly Lolly.
Mm-hmm.
I can understand. Actually, I think that's sort of a response to. We'll come back to that. But from Amani Mohammed says they're from Egypt and they're trying to speak English fluently. Should they speak British English or American English? So this is the long debates that I guess will never end between British and American English. But actually, in my opinion, that's kind of an oversimplification, because even within the UK and within the United States, there's lots of different accents and different vocabulary that tends to be used in certain areas rather than others. Even some grammatical differences. So it's, to say, there's British English and American English is an oversimplification.
And of course, that's not taking into account Canadian English, South African English,
Australian, New Zealand,
New
India.
Zealand, Micronesian, India, Pakistan, Nigeria. Yeah.
And so what we do, our philosophy at the English Language Club is to teach English as an international language.
Yes.
So we're not really teaching British English or American English. We're just trying to help people communicate in English. Kind of generally, as an international language. So my view is that it doesn't matter if you have a little bit of an accent, as long as you're pronouncing words right, because there's a difference between accent and pronunciation. So if you're pronouncing words right, that means you're being understood, even if people can detect that you're not a native speaker. That's fine. But as for should you learn British or American?
And to add to that too, Colin, if you have learned mostly British English, for instance, your teachers have been British, or you went to a school that emphasized British English, and then you're talking to an American or Canadian or whatever, they're going to understand you. They're probably going to recognize that you're speaking English with a bit of a British accent, but that might even not be the main thing that they hear. They might hear the accent from your native language more than that. So it's not going to, doing one or the other, or even a blend of the two, is not going to make it harder to communicate with anybody. With the exception maybe of some people who have really, really strong local accents, and they would be hard to understand anyway. Yeah.
Well, that actually ties in with Lolly's comment.
Right.
So they were saying, I can understand American English, British English, Canadian English, but I can't understand Irish English. I don't know why. So certain parts of Ireland often have a very strong accent, which can make it difficult to understand. That's probably what the problem is. I think
a lot of people, even native English speakers, have this problem, and it's not just Irish.
No.
Yeah. There's also many people have trouble understanding someone who has a very strong Scottish accent. In the U.S., somebody who has maybe a very strong Southern accent or Appalachian accent might be very difficult, even for other Americans to understand. Someone with a very strong Bostonian accent, someone with a very strong Newfoundland accent. Some people are going to have trouble understanding them. So it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with learning English. It's just the reality even for native speakers.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment I live in Somerset in the west of England, and I don't know if you've ever seen the film Hot Fuzz, where this area has its own accent. I'm not from here originally, but it has its own accent, and there's varying degrees to which some people have this accent. And in that movie, there's this scene where they have to translate to what a farmer's saying, and it has to go through two different people because they can't understand each other. But anyway, yeah. So, but getting back to, how can Lolly Lolly improve her the understanding of the Irish accent? Well, I guess you just if it's a particular person that you're maybe working with who's Irish, at the end of the day, it comes down to practice.
Yeah.
So you just need to tune in to that accent. I suppose that's the best advice I can give. But again, there's no easy answer. It just takes some practice and maybe a little bit of study to see how it tends to be different, what sounds tend to be different, or what words. Yeah, once you're tuned into it, it'll be easy, I think.
The only real trick I can share for learning a specific, like learning to understand a specific regional accent, is find someone who's from there that has a bit of an accent but not much of an accent, that you could understand them, and then get them to practice with you. Ask them to speak more Irishly or whatever. That's not a word, by the way. But if you, generally speaking, if you can find people who are from there but their accent isn't as strong and you can understand them, the more you listen to them, the more you will pick up the small things about their accent, and that will be easier. That'll make it easier for you to understand their accent. The accent of those who have an even stronger accent. That's how I've learned to communicate it with people when I go somewhere and there's a lot of people there that speak English, but their accent is hard for me to understand. Is you just find some people whose accent is a little less, and listen to them, and you'll get better at understanding the accent, and therefore you'll be better at understanding people whose accent is a lot stronger.
Yeah.
Can we go back to the question about British versus American English? Because I do want to point one thing out specifically. The only time that this really, really, really matters is if you are going to university in one of these different countries. If you know, say you're in Thailand and you want to go to university in an English-speaking country, and you're thinking, oh, should I go to the US? Should I go to Australia because it's closer? Whichever you pick, if you really want to go to university somewhere, really focus in on the spelling and any grammar differences of that particular variety of English. Because the only time anyone picks on you, whether you say practice or with a C or practice with an S, for instance, is if you're writing something that's going to be marked on its spelling. So unless you're a professional writer that needs to have your work edited, or you are writing a paper for school or for university, most people are not going to care. But if you're in university, they will care, and it's important to be able to do it for the marks, right? So that's the only time I really, really do recommend studying one particular variety of English, is if you're going, that you want to go to university in a specific place. But it's not going to be, if for whatever reason you wind up getting a scholarship in Canada and like, oh, I spent all this time trying to learn Australian English, it's not going to be so different that you won't be able to transition.
No. I mean, the words are the same. It's just most of the time, it's just that there's sometimes slightly different spellings, and you should have a kind of spell checker on your computer. Maybe use something like Grammarly.
Make sure to set which English you want it correct to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even in your computer settings, you can say, or on your phone, you can say, whether you want to learn, whether you want American English or British English, and so then you'll get the right suggestions when you're typing on the phone. But I think that even at universities, they're going to be quite lenient, especially. I mean, maybe not for writing final papers and things.
I mean, if you're an engineering student, then they may be. If you're an English, if you're studying English, then they won't be, right? So it just depends. And also the thing is, you can never tell which teachers or which professors are going to be very particular about that, or which markers. So it's definitely something that's worth, if you're going to university, it's worth paying attention to. I would like to ask Amani Mohammed, what do you hear most in Egypt? People speaking British English or American English or something else?
Good question. I kind of feel like, generally speaking, in the non-English speaking world, so most of the world, people are exposed more to American English than to British English because there's, Americans tend to dominate the kind of film and TV world and
media.
A lot of music, not so much, but still quite a lot. And so, yeah, I feel like people tend to learn English with an American accent a little bit when they're learning English, just because of that, because they watch movies and TV shows like Friends and things like that.
For sure. Right. And then on the other hand, there's also, for the entire 1800s, lots and lots and lots of British schools were being founded, and no American schools were founded until, not none, but most of them are more recent than the World Wars, right? So there's been a long tradition in a lot of countries of teaching British English as the English. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. And even in a place like Egypt, I might think, okay, well, the UK is a lot closer. Maybe you get a lot more tourists from the UK, but then there's a lot more people in the US. So maybe you get more tourists from the US. I don't know. That's why I'm asking. It's an interesting question. So should we answer?
I'm just going to have a quick shout out to Ibrahim Mohammed. He says hi on Facebook. And I'm going to call you Becky, tuning in from Kenya. So you're very welcome. If you missed at the beginning, I was explaining, what all we do in these sessions is we're just here to answer your questions. So we're not getting a lot of questions today. So if you do have any questions, please, get typing in the chat, and we'll do what we can. Another quick shout out. Number one has just tuned in. Hello, number one. Hello. One of our regular viewers says hello. And also online tuition for students, Fatima, saying there's a lot of things to learn here. So yeah, great. Now I think you were going to talk about some of the questions we had from last week that we didn't get to.
Yes, last week Susanta always has great questions for us from phrases from watching the news, which is a great way of really practicing your English and learning idioms and learning what all these different things mean. I also love that Susanta is disciplined to write these things down or whatever and then come and ask us about them. Because some of these things are hard, some of these phrases, you can't just Google them and figure out what they mean because they're not really an idiom. They're just a combination of things that people are talking about. So we've got several questions here. The first,
shall I? I'll just bring one up on the screen.
Okay, you can do that. Go ahead.
What does voted 17 to 4 mean? So to be voted 17 to 4, what does that mean, Tony?
So whenever actually this happens a lot in English, where you'll say one number to another number. It could be wins losses, right? Like we saw yesterday, 1-0, right? 1 to 8 would mean one team scored 1 point, one team scored 8 points, right? So that's what happens here in a vote. It means one side got 17 votes and one side got 4 votes, right?
Right. So there were 21 people voting in total.
Right.
And 17 voted for one of the options and only 4 people voted for the other option.
Right. Or if it was a yes/no, usually we put the, would you say we usually put the yes number first? But you also see something saying that it was voted in, or voted for means it won, it passed, whereas voted against or voted down would mean it lost. So for instance, you might say it was voted in, the new measure was voted in 17 to 4. Which means it
17 people voted yes for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas if someone said it was voted down 17 to 4, means, okay, 17 people voted no. But more often you'd say 4 to 17, I think. But it's hard to know. Sometimes you will see a third number, specifically with votes, which is how many people just didn't vote. They abstained. That's what it's called. So for instance, if there were 21 people here in this group voting, then we know everyone voted. But if there's actually 25, then sometimes you'd say 17 to 4 with 4 abstaining or something like that.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Quick hello to Sebastian. Says hi there.
Good to
hi,
see you
Sebastian.
again.
Yeah, and yeah, if you are just joining us, or you've joined us and you haven't said hi yet, please do say hi and get the questions coming in, because we're still not getting many questions yet. But anyway, next one from last week is another one from Susanta, who asks, what does to act from conviction mean? To act from, we often also say to act with conviction.
Yes.
So maybe we could talk about what those two mean.
Yeah, though they're slightly different, though you can use them to mean the same thing. So conviction, of course, is your very strong beliefs, right? Usually about what's right and wrong, or what should be done, something like that. So when you act from your conviction or out of your conviction, you're acting based on what you strongly believe, right? So usually this is when you're not doing the easy thing, you're doing what you believe is right, even if it's not the obvious or easy path, right? For instance, a lot of people, a lot of governments and organizations work very hard, even against their own economic interests, to fight against fossil fuels and pollution and things like this, even though it makes things harder for them in the short term, because they're acting out of conviction or from conviction that these things need to be done soon, right? So sometimes, though, there's a slight twist on this phrase when we say act with conviction, which means that you're not just doing it because of your strong beliefs, but the way you're doing it shows your strong beliefs. So for instance, I'm sure you've all seen somebody who every time a certain topic comes up, they just get they change and they become more forceful and more energetic,
Get
passionate, right? Whether it's about, whenever their sports team, people are talking about it, suddenly they're just like 150%, right? That's a good example of they're acting with conviction, or they're speaking with conviction. When you can tell this person is really passionate and they feel very strongly about it. Yeah.
Great. Okay, a couple of shout outs. Let's see. Naman says, your videos on pronunciation are so awesome. Thank you for that, my hero. Well, thank you for that. That's such a kind comment and it's comments like that make us keep making videos. Although we haven't made many videos recently, apart from the live streams, but we'll talk more about that later, because that is about to change. You'll be glad to know. And Balbal's here. We've got a question from him. We'll come back to that. And Rowan says hi. So yeah, hello to you. You're very welcome here. If you have a question, please let us know. We've got a question from Facebook from Zahid Hossein, who says, how can I improve my vocabulary? Well, we were just talking about some of the expressions that Susanta is always asking us about every week, and that's a really great way to improve your vocabulary. So what Susanta does is, throughout the week, when she's watching news in English or maybe reading news in English, and she comes across expressions or words that she doesn't understand, she writes them down. And then she comes to the live stream here, and she asks us what these expressions mean. Yeah. So we have a great time going through Susanta's questions. It's almost become a weekly segment.
Yes, exactly. So, hello, Susanta.
Oh, yes, Susanta. Hello, you're here. Yeah, we were just talking about you.
Yes.
So if you've just joined us, Susanta, you're going to have to go back, because we've answered some of your comments from last week. In the first bit this week, but yeah. So maybe if anyone's got any other tips, or Tony, if you've got any other tips for learning vocabulary for Zahid.
So one, people often talk about watching movies, watching television with subtitles. Another thing that I find can be really interesting is if you have a favorite book, especially if it's a book that's not a terribly challenging book, a book either for younger readers, or you've read it in your own language and it's a pretty straightforward read. Try giving it a read in English. You might not get as far as you think. It's a lot more work to actually just read a book. But oftentimes, because you know what the story is, you'll recognize a word even if you've never seen it before. because you're like, oh, this is the scene where they find the hat, and suddenly you turn the next page and there's this word, and they found and you don't know what the word was. Well, but because you know this story, you immediately know, oh, that's the word for hat, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it can be, that can be a fun way, reading a book that you know really well in your own language.
Yeah.
Just different tips, different things work for different people, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Great. But yeah, but just watching movies and listening to music and things is great, but it's even better if you do what Susanna does, which is write down the expressions that you don't know and either look them up or ask someone, ask us on the live stream. So you go a little bit deeper.
And then just finally, as with everything else in learning a language, as opposed to learning a skill or learning information, language is all about communication. The only way you are really going to cement those vocabulary words is by using them when talking to other people in English. So practice actually speaking to people in English and speaking to people who speak back to you in English is part of every tip that we could possibly have. Tip for pronunciation, tip for vocabulary, tip for, it doesn't matter what it is. The last step is actually talking to people in English using those skills.
And using those words and expressions that you've learned. Just quick shout out to Naman who says watching Harry Potter can greatly help. I'm learning from it too. So yeah, whatever you're interested in, you can, whatever movies you like or music you like, you can use those to focus, to learn new languing, new
let's be honest, vocabulary. What are you going to put more energy and more excitement into and stick with? Reading a dictionary or reading your favorite childhood book, right? Yeah. And which one do you going to remember better?
I've actually got one more tip. When I was learning Spanish, one thing I did that really helped was I sort of wrote down a kind of a few paragraphs about myself, the kind of thing that I would say a lot, the kind of thing that would come up a lot in conversation with different people. And I learned, I went through with a teacher and we translated that, and I studied that so that I knew how to express myself at least within that pre-written speech or sort of thing. But because it was something I knew I was going to use a lot, it really stuck. And then those new words and expressions and the grammar within that also stuck, and I was able to then use that in other things as well. So that I found that really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on then. We got this question from Balbal, who says, do native speakers still use time expressions, such as 9:45? Well, yes, we do. We say, so 9:45 would be 15 minutes before 10 o'clock is 9:45.
You do get a generational gap here, where older people tend to use these more often, and a lot of younger people don't use these phrases at all, because this is the difference between analog clocks and digital clocks, right?
Right. Yeah. So a lot of people
still think of time as being circular, and therefore I think of things like saying 22 or half past and things like this. But a lot of younger people have grown up never really using analog clocks, and so they will just give you. They'll say 2:45. I feel like you can tell what kind of person someone is by, wait until it's 1:45 and ask them what time it is. And if they say 45, they're more of a digital person. Whereas if they say 1:45, then they're more of an analog person. So you do get both of these, but I wonder sometimes whether the 1:45 and these kind of things are disappearing or not, just because so many younger people don't use them.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like maybe they are a little bit. I'm not really sure. I guess time will tell.
Time will tell.
But in answer to the question, yes, we do still use them.
And most people still do use them depending on their age.
Yeah. Okay, so question here from, actually not a question, it's number one talking to Lolly about what we were saying earlier about different accents and things. He says, if you ever heard the local people of London, it's also hard to understand. I saw a video on The Guardian where people from Westminster were talking, and it was hard to understand what they said. Yeah, London is a funny place. I lived there for a long time. In fact, I grew up in a sort of London suburb, and really London is so multicultural that you can't really say there's one London accent, because you get lots of different subcultures all living in the same space, and each one of the subcultures could have its own accent and its own, you know, dialects in a way. So yeah, it's more complicated. Again, it's more complicated than just the British English and American English.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so here's a good comment. Rose says, I'm Chinese. I use your phonetics to correct my tongue position. That's great. So I really hope you're finding the videos helpful. And like we always say, pronunciation is physical. And yeah, your tongue position for each of those different sounds is really important. So yeah, well done. Hope you're making progress. Okay. Let's see. Another comment here from Rose, who says, recently I found out why in a connected speech I could not pronounce words properly. That is because I ignored intonation and tone. So I start to imitate, but it's so boring. Okay.
So then her next comment is she started to narrow it down, practicing for half an hour a day instead of 2 hours a day. And that is a good, sometimes when there's one specific thing that you just find it hard to do for a long period of time, just shrinking it back and doing it for a shorter period of time, but doing it consistently is more useful, more helpful.
Yeah. I think the brain is like a sponge, so it absorbs. But if you try to put too much water into a sponge, it will just bounce off. If you try and put too much in it at the same time, it will just sort of bounce off. So there is a limit to how quickly we can absorb things. So learning in general is optimal if done in the right length of time, right chunks. I remember when I used to teach English. Well, I still teach English, but when I did one-on-one classes a lot more, I felt like an hour class would just kind of fly by and we wouldn't get much done. But 2 hours started to get boring, and I felt like I was exhausted and the student was exhausted after a 2-hour class. So around 90 minutes was kind of the sweet spot where by the end of it, you're just starting to, not quite absorb, but you don't just keep pushing. You stop there. So yeah, great. But 2 hours a day, that's pretty good, especially if you're doing that every day. So well done to you. Let's see. Got quite a lot of comments coming in now. I'm just trying to read them before we. So Sebastian says, I was trying to explain the difference between relationship and communication to a friend of mine, but it didn't go the way I liked. What's your advice on explaining words that are close in meaning? Okay, well, that's an interesting comment, actually, because one of the videos that we are putting out soon is all about a group of words that are very similar in meaning. They are the verbs see, look, and watch. So we've got two videos, well, one video really about them and another video about phrasal verbs that use those words. Those will be coming out next week. So yeah, I did promise you that we were going to have more videos coming out soon, and those are some of the things we've been working on recently. But going back to Sebastian's comment, is there any advice on explaining words that are close in meaning?
Well, for one, give examples, right?
Yeah.
So, for instance, yeah, give examples of where you could use one word but not the other. right? So, for instance, communication is at the heart of any language. You wouldn't say relationships are at the heart of language, because we use language to write stories, or to take notes, or to talk to people that we don't have a relationship with, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, giving examples where one works and one doesn't is a really good way of showing how they don't mean the exact same thing.
And also you can think about the grammar. So sometimes a word like relationship would often be followed by a word like with, a relationship with. Whereas communication, it could be communication with, but it's not so much. So yeah.
Also try, if you can, try breaking them into other forms. So for instance, what's the verb of relationship? Have a relationship? Relate? Well, relating to someone is not the same thing as having a relationship with them. Whereas communicate, the verb communicate, is just the action of performing communication, right? So like once you start thinking about how these words can be used as different parts of speech, it really kind of separates them in terms of what they're used for, and it helps you kind of dig into their meaning as well.
So there's another just quick follow-up from Sebastian, who says the same thing with formal and official. They're both words that are similar in meaning, but different. So I guess we use formal to refer to maybe an event or something. Maybe you need to dress in a certain way if you're going to a formal event, or you might be writing a formal invitation, or a formal like a letter to an employer could be formal. And whereas official is similar, but it means similar in the sense that it's talking about kind of how important something is. I guess something that is official would be formal.
Well, but not necessarily. Something is official if it is specifically tied to some organization, right?
Yeah.
So, for instance, the I don't know, there are, for instance, in the U.S., every state has a list of official state whatever. So there's the official state dance, the official state bird, the official state fungus in some places. Those aren't formal or special or important.
Right.
They've just been very specifically connected with an organization. So a form that you have to fill out could be official, but the language on it could be very formal, right? So formal is a level of how kind of high something is, whereas official just means it's specifically connected to a certain organization. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't, but what they mean doesn't really connect to each other.
Yeah. Or another thing is, you might be a fan of a particular sports club, and they might have their official merchandise, which is the merchandise that they put their name on,
exactly.
as opposed to other people putting
finger.
No,
just because it's part of their official merchandise.
Yeah. But then that's an example where it's not formal, but it is official.
It is official.
Yeah. So similar words, but good. Yeah, maybe that's something we can do more videos on. Similar.
I do enjoy
sounding.
doing those.
Yeah. Because there are a lot of groups of words that have a sort of similar meaning but different usage.
English is particularly filled with these things.
Okay, moving on. Rosa says, "Hi, it's important to read novels for doing good in English GCSE, English language GCSE. So is it important to read novels for doing good in English language GCSE?" Well, probably. I mean,
they make you do.
Yeah, it's something they make you do, but it's not something you're going to be graded on in an exam. So you're not going to read a whole novel for an exam, I don't think.
On a much broader level, there are only a few things in the world that are connected, that you can do, that are connected to your intelligence and your ability to perform complex tasks. And vocabulary and reading are two of them. So there's a reason that schools try so hard to push reading novels. Is because they're more interesting than reading not things that are, I don't know, like history books or whatever. But the more you read, the better you're going to get at language. And the better you're going to get at a lot of things. So there is a reason why reading is pushed so hard. But it's not something that is immediately applicable. Like how good you are at reading an adventure novel is not going to determine how good you are at taking a test. But the more novels you read, even if they are fun adventure novels, the better at English you're going to be in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, reading can be fun, so you should, and it is helpful if you are doing English language or English literature GCSE, then it's a good idea to try and find some novels that you and try to, because sometimes it's like an acquired taste. You may find it boring to start with, but try to get into it. And if you don't get into it, try a different novel and try to find something that you like, and you will, get to the point where you're enjoying it if you work at it, and then you'll be, it won't seem like work. You'll just be developing the skills that you need for your exam and having fun at the same time. So what could be wrong with that?
Yeah.
So another question about reading from number 1, which has given me an idea. So number 1 says, as an early reader who just wants to start reading novels, what novelists do you recommend for the early stage? So now, I don't know if you've got any ideas, Tony, but this is something that we could do some research into and maybe make a video about some books and authors who are really good for people learning English. And maybe we can make a separate list for different levels. So the only one I can think of for very, very early, very sort of early stage learners is Dr. Seuss, who we've mentioned in the past. Although a lot of the words that he uses are made up, but it's a really great way to show how he does it in a way that shows how the language works. Do you have any other suggestions for that, or should we save it for a video, for an actual recorded video?
We can definitely do a video as well. Just it depends. It really depends. When people say, I want to get into novels for beginners, it really does depend on what you mean and what your English level is, because reading a novel is a lot harder than reading, a news story from the BBC, or reading, example text or things that are written for English language learners. So you have to don't give up if the first one you pick is too hard or too easy. You have to find that sweet spot where it's not too easy and boring, but it's not too difficult and you can't get through it. So one thing that I think is a really good idea is, like we talked about earlier, think about what books you loved as a kid, or do some research and find out what authors of books for children are really famous that you might be interested in. Harry Potter, The Hobbit, or the Chronicles of Narnia are all good examples, because especially The Hobbit and the Chronicles of Narnia, they were written for quite young children, but they're still quite challenging for young. They're not really an 8-year-old. The Hobbit Tolkien was planning it to be for an 8-year-old reading level, but it's a bit higher than that, really. So that one can be a bit more challenging. And that's the thing. That's what you got to do. You've got to look for books that were written for children but are still popular among adults, right? Like The Hobbit, like Harry Potter, because you know that the story is interesting enough that you will be engaged with it. But at least at the beginning, the writing level might be a little bit simpler. And then just keep trying things until you find something that's at the right level but is also interesting enough for you. Because there's millions of children's picture books that have extremely simple English, but you don't want to read that. That's not interesting. And so it is just a matter of finding something that will fit what you enjoy reading and that's at the right level for you. But like Colin said, don't give up just because you either feel like it's too hard or you don't enjoy this author. Don't give up right away. Push it for a little while, because oftentimes you'll realize, okay, I'm getting the hang of it level-wise, but also some authors will really surprise you in terms of you might not immediately like the book, but you'll be really glad you kept reading it.
Great. Okay, so we've got a few comments from Rose about pronunciation, so we'll get to those in a minute. But before we do, we've just got a quick one here from Thet2, who says, hello, sir. In English conversation, people say right now and right away. Can you explain their differences? So what's the difference between right now and right away? Because they are similar. Right now. Can you do that right now? Can you do that right away?
The difference is that right now can mean including now. So for instance, if you text someone, hey, when is the English Language Club live stream? You say, oh, it's happening right now. That means because it's already started. Whereas you wouldn't say it's happening right away, because that means
it hasn't started yet, but it
hasn't started yet.
Starting very, very soon.
Whereas you could definitely say, if it's like 8:59, because I'm in Eastern time zone, and someone texts you, hey, has the English Language Club started yet? And you could say, it's starting right now, even if it hasn't literally started, but it's starting in like a minute. So right now can mean right away, meaning very close to now, but in the future. But right now can also mean it's already going on, right? So for instance, you could say, the Earth is spinning through space right now as we speak. It didn't start doing it. I wouldn't say it's going to start spinning right away, because it's been spinning for years and years and years, right?
Yeah. So they're both very similar, but right away always refers to something starting. Right now can be something that's already in progress.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So first question from Rose says, would it be better that you could display tongue position movement pictures alongside your explanation? I remember you used your hands functioning as the tongue. Well, the thing you've got to remember, and this is going to be important for your next comment, is that it's not all about the tongue. It's not, the tongue is just one of the things you need to think about. There's also your teeth and your lips, and whether something is voiced or not. But you're right. I mean, it could be, and there are some diagrams that show tongue position in more detail. But we're not a phonetics channel. We are a channel about learning English, and we use a little bit of phonetics as a tool to help people with their pronunciation. So I don't know. I don't think I want to get into that much detail specifically about the tongue. But other than what I've already done. Great comment. But here's another comment that so as a Chinese person, it's hard to pronounce the R sound, or r. Yeah. Now this, I reckon, what you're doing is you're paying too much attention, or you're trying to make this sound with your tongue, but actually you don't make this sound with your tongue. Have a look at me when I say this, r. So I would say the important thing about this sound, and the reason a lot of people say it wrong, is that the inside of your lip, the inside of your bottom lip, needs to touch your top teeth like this, r. So it's often, as when people are speaking more naturally and quickly, it's going to be very subtle and you may hardly notice it. But to really say that sound correctly, that's what you need to do. And I think that doing that, touching your teeth to the inside of your bottom lip, is the thing that people are not accustomed to doing. And this is why Chinese people and a lot of people from other countries as well struggle with the r sound, and it often comes out like a l, because they're trying to make it with their tongue and not their lip. So yeah, it's not all about the tongue. That's my advice. Think about the lips as well. let me know if that's helpful. I hope it is. And yeah, let's see. We got any other questions?
Yeah.
Here's a good one. Farouk Omar says, I'm a new ESL teacher. Do I have to memorize the whole English grammar? Do I have to learn all of English grammar in order to be a teacher?
It depends on what level you're teaching at, right? You know, if you're teaching a university course in English grammar, then you have to know a lot. If you're teaching beginners, you just have to know how sentences work, right?
Yeah. I think if the answer was yes, you need to know all grammar to be a teacher, there would be no teachers, because very few people know all grammar.
Right.
I mean, even native speakers. Yeah, and I guess it depends on what you mean by know grammar. Like, so native speakers, they don't know grammar. They know how to speak, and they speak grammatically correctly most of the time. But they don't necessarily know the grammar, because the grammar is the science. The grammar is the tool behind sentence structure and things like that. It's not the actual actually doing it. It's not the actual speech, right? So I would say no, you don't. I mean, really, I'll let you into a little secret. When I first started teaching English, I learned that all you really need to know is the next couple of pages in the book. As long as you do that and you plan each lesson, go lesson by lesson, and as long as each lesson is planned, then you'll be fine. But don't sort of think you need to know everything in order to teach. You don't at all.
Just make sure that the basic things like sentence structure, how the different types of speech are used, how pronouns work, depending on how, like, what level you're teaching, how tenses work. The very basic things, make sure that you understand them really, really well, because what's going to happen is people are going to ask questions, and if it's a question about something minute or something that you're going to teach later, you can just say, okay, we're going to cover that later. Let's focus on this right now. But oftentimes what's going to happen is they're going to ask a question about what you're learning and how it relates to other things that you've learned. And the way you know how to answer those questions is by really understanding the very, very basic, not even just the rules, but the way the grammar works. Understanding how a sentence is put together, understanding how words are put together, this kind of stuff. That's what you really, really want to focus on understanding, is the very, very basic part. Sometimes the very first things you teach. That's actually tends to be the hardest thing for teachers in general, is to really focus on understanding how the very, very most basic things work, because that's where you want to go to answer as many questions as you can. Bring it back to the most basic element, because that's how you anchor it and help them learn it.
Yeah. So the sort of most basic and most important elements of English grammar, and probably any language, is the tenses that are used and how the tenses are used. And that is what our course, which is going to be released on January the 1st, which is Friday, we're going to make that available. That's what that course is all about. So it's called Inside English, and it is all about the tenses and but specifically how each one is formed, or at least how there is consistency. Because I think people, because there's so many irregular verbs and things like that, and so many, each tense has its own something weird about it. People think that tense is very difficult to learn, and maybe it is because of the angle they're coming at it from, the way they're trying to learn it. But actually, there is a lot of consistency. There is, things are done in the same way. For example, so we've got 3 kind of big ideas or main ideas in the course. The first one is that there's 3 sort of structures. You've got the positive structure, the negative structure, and a question structure. And this relates to how you've got the 3 types of word that every sentence has: a subject, and then there's an auxiliary verb, and then the main verb. And what order these are in determines whether it's a positive sentence, a negative sentence, or a question. And this is the same for every verb and every tense. This is very consistent. So once you understand that, it really makes things a lot easier. Then the second big idea, I think, is that auxiliary verbs are really the most important, more than the main verb, for telling you what tense something's in. We do change the form of the main verb sometimes, especially in like the past simple when we add the ed. But actually, it's the auxiliary verb that tells us more about what tense we're using. Now that's confusing, I know, because sometimes we don't have the auxiliary verb, but just the fact that we don't have it, we know we don't need to say it. There is still an auxiliary verb, and it's only the simple tenses that where you can skip out the verb, the auxiliary verb. So then we know, and the simple tenses use do or did, if it's depending on if it's present or past. So if it's skipped out, we know it's do or did. Anyway, things like that. And what's the third big idea, Tony? I can't remember.
The third one is the focus on the
oh, right.
Yeah.
So what's the other one?
Did you miss the time of action and type of action?
Yes. So every tense has got two elements. You've got past, present, and future. Those are the sort of time of the action. And then you've got the simple, continuous, and perfect tenses. So you just need to remember those 6 things, and then by making different combinations of them, you get to the 9 tenses. And then there are 12 tenses, really. There's another 3 because tenses can be both continuous and perfect. But yeah, so we just sort of break things down, and we focus on looking at tense logically, in a way that makes sense. So we acknowledge, yes, there's lots of irregular things, but let's focus on how it does make sense rather than making things difficult for ourselves. So yeah, if you're interested in that will be available on our website from
starting on Friday.
From Friday. And I guess we'll probably talk more about that next week if we're going to be offering some discounts, things like that. I'm sure we will do for people who are watching the live stream and people who are members, certainly. So yeah, make sure you tune back in next week for that. Great. So Frank says hi. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you too.
Good to see you.
Let's see. So Thet again says, in English there are so many idioms and slang. I try so hard to learn the slang and idioms because when someone says those words, but I don't understand. So can you give me advice for that? So this is similar to what we were talking about earlier on about vocabulary. Yeah. So it's just when you hear these phrases you don't understand, try to write them down, look them up, or come to us with the specific slang. This is what Susanna does, ask us, and we can talk about what those phrases mean. But it's very difficult to answer a question like this just generally speaking. We need to get into the specifics.
Yeah, but that is the answer. The answer is write them down, keep track of them, and look them up or ask somebody. That's really the only way. Idioms, but don't feel bad. That's what idioms are. Is there something that you won't understand just by hearing it? You have to understand the meaning behind it, right? So ask them. If someone says something and you're like, I don't have any idea what that means, ask them. Sometimes they won't know either. They know how to use it, but they can't give you the exact meaning. But definitely, definitely just keep track of those so you can look them up or ask about them. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Mohammed here says, hello, I want to talk in English and I seek support from you. And there's another comment here from where is it?
From
And Mohammed again. So I want to take the English course from your club. So yeah, the course, the only course as such that we have is this course called Inside English, which will be released on Friday. And if you check out our website, let's see. Well, this is the page specifically for the live streams, but englishlanguageclub.co.uk. If you go there on Friday, you will see links to the Inside English course. But other ways that you can get involved are obviously make sure you're subscribed and you click the bell icon so that you get notified when we're doing these live streams. I think these live streams are really great value, you know, like especially at the moment when we don't have huge numbers of people watching. So you really get our attention, you know. So yeah, you can ask us questions, and that's a great way you can get involved. But also you can join the English Language Club. If you look below next to the subscribe button, you should see a join button. Now, I know that not everyone will see that because it's not available to all over the world in every country. But in most countries, I think it is. So if you do see that, we are planning to do a lot more things that are just for members, including some Zoom calls starting next week. I think we said we would do our first one on Wednesday. So after the day after the next live stream, we're going to do a new thing, which will be a Zoom call for any member who wants to sit down and talk to us. So I'm really looking forward to doing that, so we can actually see you face to face, actually hear you speak, instead of just us doing all the talking. But that's just one of the things. There's also behind the scenes videos that I've done. I'm going to do some more of those. And there's other things like you get to use different emojis and things in the chat and things like that. But I think the Zoom calls are really the main thing. And as we don't have a huge number of members, we're still getting started with that. We're going to open the Zoom calls up to members of every level. There are 3 different levels, but as we get more and more people, it will become for just the higher levels. But for the month of January, it's going to be for great value. You will get the 4 of those. We're going to do it for every week in January, so you'll get 4 chances to sit down and talk to us, and you only need to spend £1.99, which is nothing really for 4 hours of English classes. And then after that, we'll have to think about what the schedule will be ongoing. Yeah, so definitely for the month of January, you can't really go wrong. So we're also going to plan to open up the Discord channel, so you can chat to each other, find people from your own country learning English, and have a similar kind of comments and ask questions throughout the week, not just in this 1 hour. So we will bring out more information about all these things next week, which will be the first English Language Club Hangout in January. Now, how are we doing for time, Tony? Do you want to?
I've got a bit more time.
Yeah, we'll keep going.
Answer some of these questions. Okay.
Have you got any questions you've looked at?
Yeah, there's a let's see, Bokajtob has a comment. Tet, who has another question. Farouk Omar has another comment, and Mariuma Karichi has a question.
Okay. Okay, is this the one you're talking about?
Yes. Yeah.
So I found it useful to have a grammar dictionary on hand to look up the answers I didn't know. And they are a teacher.
So commenting on what Farouk Omar was saying about, how much grammar do you actually have to have memorized in order to be a teacher? And that's a good point. In my one of the things that makes a person an expert isn't that they know all the answers, but that they understand the answers when they look them up. right?
Mm.
If a typical person could look up an answer to let's say a complicated math question online, and yeah, you can get the answer, but are you going to be able to understand that answer, much less explain it to somebody else? Whereas somebody who's had a lot of mathematical training will be able to immediately understand the answer and understand it well enough to explain it to somebody else. So that's really the key to being an expert on something, is knowing where to find the information, knowing enough about the subject that you can understand the answer, and then having the skill to explain it so that other people understand it as well. So if that works out to be a grammar dictionary, a lot of people just use the internet. Some people have favorite websites or whatever, but whatever works for you, really.
Mm. Great. Yeah. So another question here from Thet. He says, when someone talks to me in English, I understand what they say, but when it's my turn to speak, my brain is empty. I don't know how to reply to him. I'm frozen at that time. So please, sir, how do I fix this? So yeah, I guess we can probably all relate to this. Like you know the words, you know what you want to say, or at least later on you know how to say it, but in the moment the words just don't come to you fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
So are there any tips you can give for that?
So first of all, I just want to say this is a good place to be at in terms of how your brain learns things. If you really are understanding what you're hearing, and you're struggling, it's not that you are struggling to get out what you're saying, but you're struggling to come up with something to say. That's a stage in how your brain learns things, right? So don't feel bad about it. The second thing is there's a couple of strategies that you can use, and I'll talk about those in a second. But really, the only way to get past this stage is to continue to learn and continue to practice, right? And your brain will get past this stage eventually. So a couple of tips. For one, sometimes the easiest thing to do, because again, part of the reason here might be that your brain is beginning to try to formulate things in English, and it's struggling to do that. So take a step back, think about what you want to say in your own language, and just take a moment to translate that, right? Because that's probably something you've practiced doing a lot, and you're faster at that than you are at thinking, what to say in English straightforward. So that's one of the possible reasons that you'd be kind of stuck, and that's a good place to be at, where your brain's trying to formulate things in English. And then just give your brain a break, step back into your first language, think about, okay, well, how do I want to respond to that, and then translate it, even if it's only kind of approximately. Another good tip is to have something to say that you immediately can just kind of get out. To fill that space, like, oh, that's
like
really
what I was saying earlier on. Like, have something rehearsed that you
exactly, yeah. Even if it's just something as simple and short as, oh, that's really cool, or yeah, I wanted to talk about that, or something like that. Something that you can put in anytime you are struggling for what to say. It can really help. Just give you a little bit of time to figure out what you're going to say, and also kind of jumpstart your brain. Yeah.
And try to use body language as well.
Yeah.
If you've got something to express, but you can't think of the words, try doing other things. Make eye contact. Don't just think, oh, I can't think of the word, and kind of look away, look at the ground, because then people don't know that you've got something to say. They might be able to help you. When you're talking face to face with somebody, and you can't think of the words, they sometimes can fill in the gaps and tell you the words themselves. If they can guess, and then you can confirm if that was right. So yeah, I think body language is important too. Eye contact, what you're doing with your hands. Yeah, think about that. Okay, so we've got one more question from Meriuma, and then a comment from Farouk, which I want to touch on, and then we're going to call it a day for this week. But as we've been saying, from next week we're going to be doing a lot more things. We're going to have 3 new videos next week. We've got the live stream as always, but the Zoom call. Make sure you join up and join us in the Zoom call on Wednesday. And I'm hoping to find a few other teachers that are also doing things online, and just having a conversation with them as a live stream that you can join us with for that. So yeah, that's what we're hoping to do all throughout the month of January. We're going to be putting out a lot more content than we normally do. But let's go back to Meriuma, who says, what is the difference between a frequency adverb and an adverb of degree, and between extreme adjective and a gradable adjective? Thank you so much. So adverbs of frequency are things like always, sometimes, never. They're adverbs that say, so first of all, an adverb is a verb that adds meaning to a verb, or describes a verb. So I run quickly. Quickly would be adding meaning to the verb run. But so adverbs of frequency describe how often something happens.
So I run.
Never,
often.
I never run. Yeah, or I never run. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it'll always have something to do with time.
Yeah. So frequency, how often you do something. Mm-hmm. So an adverb of degree, what's a good example of an adverb of degree?
Adverb of degree is about how much. So I run, let's see, I run hard, or I'm very good at this, or something like this. Yeah. Something that tells you how much of it there is, right?
Yeah.
A little, a lot.
Yeah, so those words are kind of self-explanatory. You know, frequency is how often you do something.
Degree is how much.
Degree is how much you do something. Yeah. So, and what's the difference between between extreme adjective and a gradable adjective?
So I have a really good example of this one.
Okay.
So a gradable adjective would be sick. You can be a little sick. You can be kind of sick. You can be pretty sick. You can be very sick. You can be extremely sick. You can be incredibly sick. They're gradable because you can be lots of different amounts of sick. But you can't be a little dead. That's an extreme adjective because it's just all the way out to the most extreme already, and it's done, right? Yeah. You can't be a little bit or a lot. You can be a little sick, a lot sick, incredibly sick, but then you're just dead. There's no degrees to that. Another example could be like, I'm hungry, I'm very hungry, I'm starving. You can't be a little starving. You can't be a lot starving. Starving is just the most extreme version of hungry, and so on. Except people sometimes they use these like, oh, I'm a little bit starving or something like that. And that's not, you can't really, but there's nothing. So that's why I don't really like these terms, extreme and gradable adjectives, just because that's not how
they're very, I mean, this is just grammar jargon.
Exactly.
But we know what you mean. But
because again, most of the time you don't see this in actual distinction. That's why I use dead as an example of an extreme adjective, because it's one of the few things where you really aren't ever going to use it in any kind of degree. It's just final.
Great. So I just wanted to touch on this comment from Farouk. He says, you helped me through my university years, and now you're helping me through my career. Thank you. Well, that's so great to hear. So yeah, thank you so much for that. And so since I've been working with Tony, for the last 6 months, we've been working on this course, and we've been doing these live streams. But from the new year, we are aiming to be putting out a lot more videos and doing a lot more and bringing the community together through the Zoom calls, through these continued live streams and things. So things are, even though English Language Club, we've actually been going almost 10 years. So yeah, I think we will, into 2021, we will celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the first videos that were uploaded on this channel. But also it feels like we're just getting started. So yeah, I really hope that English Language Club will go beyond just teaching English. because, and I've said this in the past, learning English is not people. People are probably not just learning English for the sake of being able to speak English. People are learning English because they want to study abroad, or they need to for their job. But whatever reason, it's to develop their life in some way. So, I want to start thinking about what we're doing at English Language Club and exploring, helping people with that deeper reason for learning English. And I really hope we can see people reach their full potential and achieve things that they achieve their wildest dreams. That's what I'm hoping we'll see over the next few years, is that we'll be part of people reaching their full potential. So thank you for that comment, Farouk. It's really great that we've been helpful to you. And just quickly, Thet says, do I find a Zoom link in the description? So the Zoom calls are going to be just for people who are members. So you'll need to be a member, and then you will get access, and you'll get notified when we post member-only content. And we'll do a post with the Zoom link in there. But we'll talk more about that next week, and we'll also talk about the Discord channel next week. But I think that will wrap things up for today. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.